Hello and welcome to this YouTube Live from Proposals for NGOs and Philantropia. My name is Dr. Eva Wieners. I'm from Germany and I have been working in the fundraising field basically for the last decade. I've been working with Proposals for NGOs since 2018. And I've been living in Nepal for the last 7 years. Last year I relocated to Germany and now I'm back here, but I'm still working mainly with small and grassroots NGOs. And today I'm really excited to be here live with you to give a little presentation about the fundraising strategy in times of coronavirus and the importance of it, why you need it, and to give you some pointers. And after the presentation that I will be giving, there will be time for questions. So stick around and there will be time to ask me direct questions and I will try to give you as much information as I can. I just want to make clear again though that I'm not a medical professional, so I can't answer any questions related to the coronavirus that are medical. And also, of course, there will be many questions that are super specific to your project. I will try to answer them in as much detail as I can. But of course, I don't know the situation in every country and in every circumstances. But I think I'll be able to give you some pointers that will help you to develop a good and sustainable fundraising strategy, even in these crazy times. It would be great if you could just let me know if you can hear me clearly, because getting some feedback is good. I can already see that some people are in on this live and commenting. So if you could just let me know if you can hear me clearly, if the video is okay, and if we can just get started with the presentation, that would be great. I think people from all over the world are joining us. I'm in Germany, so I'm based in Europe. It's 12 o'clock in the morning here. Well, not in the morning. I guess for some of you it's afternoon already. And for some of you it's all different kinds of time zones. Let me check if everything is okay. Oh, so somebody from Pakistan just joined, from Latvia. Oh, that's great. Okay, so I think you can all hear me. Nobody's telling me that I'm not audible, so I'll just get started with this. Okay, so today's presentation is going to be about how to develop a successful fundraising strategy in the times of Corona. Today, many people joined us, so I think this is a very sensitive and important topic for many NGOs in these times, because many organizations realize the importance of a fundraising strategy right now. Because if everything is easy, if everything is going the normal way, you can still kind of wiggle your way through without a good strategy. But in times of crisis like this one, many organizations realize that there's actually a need for a coherent strategy to be able to deal with these situations. So today I will talk about what is a fundraising strategy in general, so that we're all on the same page, that we all have the same understanding. Why does my NGO need one? Why is it important at all? Why is it particularly important right now in times of the coronavirus that affects us all in all the countries that we're in and in all the circumstances? And how can you develop a fundraising strategy? This last part was super detailed. I'll just give you some pointers, but I'm sure that will already help you to set up something. So I think we'll just jump right in and start. What is the fundraising strategy? So the fundraising strategy is a document that details your strategic plans for fundraising in your organization, and it should be based on your business plan. And the important words there are strategic and planning, because these things refer to things that you yeah, that you've planned out, that don't just happen to you and your organization, but that you have a plan for, that you know how you want to deal with it, and that gives you perspective for the future. And if you ask anybody who has a business, they will always tell you it is super important to have a business plan, to have numbers, to be able to plan into the future, to know what's coming your way and how you will deal with it and how you will react to it. So a strategy will address some plans and will help you to develop a way to implement them, because plans are great, but if there's no strategy attached to them, then you still don't know how to implement them. So this brings everything together. And I know that many people working in the in NGOs are a little bit hesitant to use this kind of business jargon, like business plan and thinking about things in economic terms only. But you have to start thinking of your organization's work as a business operation, because you still, of course, you're doing this for a good cause. Probably you're not doing this to make profit, but you still have to keep your organization running. You still have to have professional operations so that you can exist in the long term. Your business model has to be sustainable, and that is as important for a for-profit business as it is for an NGO or for a non-profit business. Because if your model is not sustainable and if you're not able to sustain your operations, then you will be in big trouble very quickly. So you kind of have to think of these things in these business vocabulary. You have to make it work. You need a business plan, and maybe that business plan won't show where you want to make profit, but it will show how you want to impact the communities you work with, how you want to implement your plans, and how you plan to sustain your work. So just to explain a little bit more why this is a very important topic for me, I want to tell you a little bit about my own fundraising story, because like developing a fundraising strategy, understanding the importance of the fundraising strategy is very close to my heart, because I realized in the last couple of years that was one of my biggest mistakes when I started out my career. So I got into fundraising, I think the same way as many people do. I was passionate about a cause. I used to work in South America, in Ecuador, with different projects, and I was very passionate about this cause. I wanted to collect some money. I wanted to support the people. I wanted to develop a big project. I had so many ideas, and it was great. And I started off just putting a lot of time and effort in it, collecting money with friends. I had crowdfunding campaigns, some very small grants, etc. And everything started off quite well. But then I got busy. I started university. I didn't have that much time anymore, so everything went downhill from there. And instead of being able to sustain the project that I had started, I didn't have a plan in place. There was no strategy. We had no long-term planning. So a lot of things that we had fought for before just kind of went down the drain because we didn't have a long-term plan or a strategy. So of course that made me very sad, and I learned my lesson. And in the future, in future projects, I always tried to figure out the long-term perspective before I went all in. Because in many organizations, it is that way, that you have a founder or one person that is many times is also very charismatic and able to pull donations and able to make money and to engage other people, to maybe talk to businesses, etc., and to get everything going. But if you only rely on that one person, if you only rely on that one way of getting donations, of getting income, then once that person for some reason drops out, has less time, etc., your organization is in big trouble. And if you also don't have a good future planning, if you don't know what you want to do next year, in 2 years, and 3 years, then you never know how much money you need. So then you might sometimes be in the situation that you get a huge donation and you don't have any projects to implement, or sometimes you have costs that appear and you don't have the money, and then suddenly you have to make more money, and it's extremely stressful. And what I also realized is that when I didn't have a strategy, this was on my mind constantly. because you're always trying to figure out a way how to get more money. Maybe I can ask this person for a donation. Maybe I can plug in my fundraising, my crowdfunding campaign here. Maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that. And you never fully focus on the project itself, because you always have that lingering question of, where do I get the money from? And then once I developed further in my career, I realized if I have a strategy, if I plan strategically what we want to achieve with the project in the future, what will be our activities, and if we attach a budget to that and a strategic fundraising plan, then I don't have to worry about that all the time, because I know what will be coming. There will be no surprises. You can focus your energy on fundraising, and once that is done, you can focus your energy on the project again. So I realized that even though it's a little bit more work in the beginning, if you sit down and plan strategically, you also free a lot of resources within yourself and within your organization. So this picture is from a project that we did 3 years ago or 4 years ago in Nepal. So that time I was already, I had understood the importance of a fundraising strategy. And with that organization, we always sat down and did long-term planning. So every year we planned out the next 3 years. So we looked at the plans for the next 2 years, if they were still accurate, or if we had to adjust them, if we wanted to include anything new, and then we developed ideas on how we could fund that. And that gave me a much better perspective, and that gave the project a much better perspective. And the project is still there, even though I left, so it wasn't dependent on one person. And it just made me realize how important it is to have this strategic view on these small things, even though, of course, often they start with a passion or with compassion, with an idea of a single person. But if you want to really kick off a good project, if you want to work in a professional environment, it is important to set these things up in a professional way. So this is the quote that I kind of try to follow in my work as a fundraiser: to be a proactive fundraiser and not a reactive grant seeker. So many NGOs that I met, that I talked to, are in this kind of passive position, that they are waiting for a good call, and then they answer to that call, and then they do their projects. Of course, it is very difficult, but we should try to be proactive, to exactly know what we want to do, and be proactive about figuring out a way to fund those projects. And it's not the only way to ask for grants. There's many other things that you can do and that you can develop when you develop a good fundraising strategy. So for your self-worth, as well as for the way you can present and act within your organization, it's always better to be proactive. Because then you're always one step ahead. If you're reactive, you can just react to things that happen to you, and you're never the person really doing things. So trying to turn that around it's not easy, but it's a very good step, and it's really worth the effort. One other thing that is very important to understand if you want to develop a good fundraising strategy, and if you want to approach fundraising in your organization in a more strategic and long-term, with a long-term perspective, is to understand the grant cycle. Because that's also something that many organizations don't have very clear. They feel like, we come across a call for proposals, we write a proposal, maybe we're lucky, we get the money, we implement the project, and then there's like this big void because nothing's prepared. And then you start again looking for, maybe you're lucky, you come across a call, maybe you search around and you find a call, and then you do the same thing again. But this way, your fundraising and everything is connected to a lot of insecurity, because you don't know if you can keep stuff long term. If you can keep working with beneficiaries in the long term, next year and 2 years, etc. So the whole operations of your organization are never really focused on the long term, and you lose a lot of energy and a lot of time just trying to deal with this insecurity that you never know. Will we be funded next year? What can we do in 2 years? Can we keep our stuff in these numbers, etc.? So to understand the grant cycle, yeah, you have to make it clear in your head that this is a cycle. It's not a linear process, but it's a cycle. And in your organization, there's not just one grant cycle going on, but probably several. So you start with research. So you research very well which grants are available, which calls are out there, which donors might be a good fit, how you can contact them, etc. We have a full course just on donor research that you can check out. It is very helpful to really find a good fit, because many NGOs also jump that step and think, oh, we'll just apply with as many foundations and institutions as we can. But that's a mistake, because the better your research is, the better your chances are that you will get accepted in the end. So you do your research, find a good fit, then you prepare your proposal. Of course, that is also very important, to put together a quality proposal that answers all the donors' questions and that adheres to the guidelines, and that is exactly what the donor wants to see. You also have to learn how to speak their language to be able to show them that you are the perfect partner for this project. Right now, in times of Corona, maybe research and preparation, writing the proposal, maybe you don't have exactly as much time for these steps as you used to have. So this changed a little bit. If there's an emergency, you feel like you have a good project, we just want to get it out, you can send the proposal to maybe some donors as well that you had not the time to research thoroughly. But in the normal, usual situation, you should put that time in. Right now, in these times, in many circumstances, speed is of core importance, because many NGOs are starting to move right now. So if you have a good project that you want to get funding for, now is the time to move and maybe to make some compromises on research and proposal writing. Of course, you have to do it as well as you can. The proposal has to be precise, has to be correct, has to be fact-filled, etc. But maybe you don't have weeks and weeks now to put that work into a proposal. Still, after that, you apply. If you're lucky, you'll get the grant, so you can implement your project. And like I said, many NGOs stop there. But then comes one of the most important steps, the evaluation. And not only the evaluation of your project itself, which comes with writing reports, etc., but evaluation of your fundraising process. Was that correct? Did you make any mistakes? Any lessons that you can learn from that? Did you choose the right contact person? Did they give you any feedback? Was there any issues in your proposal that you can fix for the next time? So evaluate your process and write down lessons learned, so that that knowledge doesn't get lost, because it is very important to use that. And then you start again researching, even before your project is done, because you know that you will need more funding after this. You always want to find reliable partners. And then you start all over again, researching, preparing, applying, implementing, and evaluating. So it is a circle. It doesn't stop. Of course, if you have a one-off project, you want to build something and then that's it, that's a different story. But most NGOs want to continually work and want to kind of establish a continuous income stream. So right now, many NGOs are really badly affected by the coronavirus. And I was just asking myself the question, why is that? Why are so many NGOs affected? Of course, this virus just kind of blew apart public life in most countries worldwide. So of course, it will have a huge effect. And it was clear that it will be a big problem worldwide, because many organizations can't implement their projects anymore. You have to start working from home, which is not easy in many countries. Many countries don't have the proper digital infrastructure, etc. Yes, those problems were foreseeable, and of course, every business has them as well. But at the same time, there's other things that affect NGOs particularly. In many organizations, there was very poor planning. Like we said before, many organizations just jump from one project to the next, and they plan something, they get funding, they get lucky, they do it, and then they wait for the next one. But that is not how any business would be run. You have to kind of continually be able to support your operations. So many NGOs did not have that planning in place, no strategy in place. So many NGOs, just kind of wing it. And that might work if you have a small project and if you're continuously, But I think most of you also know that feeling when you don't know how you can continue, when you have to face beneficiaries and tell them, look, we know this project was great for you, but right now we just ran out of funding. And that's a very bad feeling. Nobody wants that. And especially now when priorities have changed due to the coronavirus, many NGOs kind of, get the... in Germany, we say we get the bill for it. If we made a mistake, in the end, you get the bill for it because, you didn't put in that work beforehand. You didn't have a strategy. And now in this kind of dramatical situation, you really see the results of that. Many NGOs also depend on only one income source, which is not a sustainable model, because if that income source goes away, then you're in huge trouble. Some NGOs just depend on one big donor or on one enterprise that funds them, on one CSR program, etc. And a lot of that will go away now because everybody in this world is feeling insecurity. Everywhere businesses are suffering, people are suffering, and so donations will go down, CSR programs will get shut down. So if you only rely on one source from that kind of sphere of fundraising, then you're in big trouble now. And a strategy will also help you to develop different income sources so that your house rests on more than one pillar. Because if you just have that one fundraising pillar and that pillar breaks away, your house will crash down. If you have several, you might be able to resist even if one breaks down, or maybe even if two break down. Then most NGOs didn't have emergency plans to continue their operations. So especially in the first weeks and even months of this crisis, many NGOs just kind of shock froze. They stopped communicating. They didn't communicate with donors, with partners. They sent their people home. They didn't think about ways of how to keep working, how to use them. Of course, it was important to think about how you can keep everybody safe, and sending people home was and is the way to keep people safe. But at the same time, you could also have them still work on new things, thinking about how to digitalize your operations, etc. So that is something that should be included in an emergency plan, and set up some kind of digital infrastructure so that people can still work from home. Another problem is that many NGOs didn't have flexibility to deal with this new situation, neither in their fundraising nor in their operations. So a certain degree of flexibility is needed to be able to deal with a crisis like this. So of course, nobody was expecting this, even though some experts have been telling us that this would happen for years, but nobody was really expecting this. So the first time we get a free pass, even though, of course, it is a bad situation. But now we know that this kind of situation can happen again. So from now on, NGOs need emergency plans, and they need to be able to deal better with this the next time around. So why do you need a fundraising strategy? So we've already talked about some of these points, so I will just go through them quickly. You need a fundraising strategy to avoid funding gaps, so that you don't have a couple of months between the end of one project and the start of the next one, where you maybe even have to let go of your staff, can't pay rent, etc. Then if you strategically plan which tools, which instruments are a good fit for you, you can put your entire fundraising and funding on a more stable base. Then it's not a big deal if you lose one income source because you still have others. A strategy will also tell everybody within your organization who has to do what and when, and that is very important, because especially if your organization is a little bit bigger, many times there's a lot of confusion around fundraising, who will do what, and then everybody does research, and then you do double work, but then nobody writes the proposal, things get forgotten, there's no timelines, etc. So a strategy document will put all of that in writing, and then everybody knows what they have to do and when they have to do it, and that will help you to streamline the process. And having a strategy will just free up mental space for other tasks. Like I said before, I realized that in the beginning of my career, I kind of was thinking about fundraising constantly because I never really had the security of knowing, oh, I know what will happen the next 2 years, so I'm fine. But I always had to go kind of week by week, so it was bothering me all the time. And I think that is the case for many fundraisers, but also for many project workers. If you don't have that kind of security, it's bugging you, and it's taking up mental space. And if you have a strategy, if you know exactly, okay, next month we have to start researching, but my colleague Amanda will do that, and then I have to write the proposal, and then James will submit it or whatever. If you have set out these things, then it will free up your mental space for other tasks. And why is it so important, particularly now in these times? I've also said a couple of these things before. So right now in this crisis, we all realize that without a strategy, in an emergency situation like this, nobody knows what to do anymore. So working together as a team has gotten even more difficult, because you all have probably worked remotely from the home office. Everybody's struggling. So without a plan in place, now nobody is going to follow through on things, or very few people. So having a strategy in a situation like this and having a plan that you can follow will help you, because this is a stressful situation. For many people, it's not only economically stressful, but psychologically stressful, because they are scared. They might have family members that are in the risk group. It is a scary situation. So developing a plan right now is very high demand, because that needs creativity. You just need to be on the top of your feet, etc. But if you already have all of that and just have to follow through with it, that's much easier. So having a strategy to follow and having emergency plans is a much better way to enter into this crisis. Adjusting a plan is always easier than developing one from scratch. And also, like I said before, many donors are dropping out now. Personal donations are going down because people are scared to lose their jobs, and they don't know what will happen. So personal donations are going down, especially if you work in developing countries where you've received donations from Europe or from the US. Those donations will not come in those amounts anymore, because the situation is difficult, especially in the US as well, and people will probably start supporting projects around them, because suddenly all these huge issues of poverty, health problems, education, they are just right next door now, because even in Europe and especially in the US, this hits much closer to home. So donations will go down. Businesses will probably stop running their CSR programs, because they also have problems. You've seen many, even huge businesses almost filing for bankruptcy because they lost so much income. So if you were only depending on one of these sources and never did a thorough analysis of the circumstances that you're working in, and if you never researched any alternatives, then right now you're kind of left with nothing and you have to start at zero. If you did a strategy and analyzed your own fundraising, analyzed your strengths and weaknesses, and also analyzed the circumstances that you're working in, then you already have a lot more information now to work with. So having a strategic vision and a strategic way to address the future helps you in these kind of situations, because then you can just switch to autopilot and follow the plan that you have developed when you had more resources. So that helps you to get through these times. And also, if you developed a strategy and if you really look critically at your fundraising before this happened, you probably already worked on making it more sustainable, not relying only on one partner, not relying only on one way of fundraising. So NGOs that already have a fundraising strategy set up way better now. And if you plan how you want to continue working, you should make this an important part of your future operations. So which questions should the fundraising strategy answer? So basically, you should address 3 parts, which is where are we today, where do we want to go, and how will we get there? And you have to keep in mind, this addresses the fundraising. You need a strategy for your entire organization as well. And that strategy will answer very similar questions, but about your operations. In the fundraising strategy, you basically want to know how you want to fund all of that. So it's best if you already have developed a business plan to start off with. So you need to know what you want to do in the future, what kinds of projects you want to run, to be able to do your fundraising planning according to that. So the first question is, where are you today? And so you should look at the inside and at the outside of your organization. So how did you do your fundraising until today? Where do you get your money from? Does this work or does this not work? And it's very important that you take a critical look at this, because many things are done just because they've always been done, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're great, especially if you look at things like events. Many organizations run events because they've always run events. But sometimes the benefit is not as big as you think. So really look at all the things that you have to spend for your fundraising and what you're getting out of it. And then critically assess, is this something that we want to continue in the future, or is this something that we want to cut out? So for example, right now, if you're doing peer-to-peer fundraising, that's not possible right now, at least not on a personal level. So you kind of have to see if you can do it by phone, if you can do it using email, Skype, etc., what other channels you can use. And if you can adjust that to the current situation, or maybe you can't, and then maybe you have to discontinue that particular way of fundraising, not work with that instrument anymore. But you should also look at the outside situation, and that is something I think that we have just assumed in the past that it will be stable, but now we realize that it's not going to be stable, because something like this pandemic can happen so just critically assess the circumstances that you work in. Is this possibly going to happen again? How will this affect you? How can you address this in the future? And what can you assume will be the rules of engagement for your organization? And then you have to know where you want to go as well. So what and that doesn't mean which projects you want to implement, because yes, you need to know that, but that belongs into your business plan. But how much money do you need for that? That's what you need to know here. How much funding do you need in the future for the project that you're planning? What are your funding needs? Where do you have to get with your fundraising to be able to implement them? And that is the strategic part, because if you just if you plan projects and then just say, oh, we'll implement them if we get the money, that's not a strategy. Planning something and then getting the money by any means necessary, that's strategic planning, and that way you also know that you can work in the future. And then you have to determine how you want to get there. So which fundraising instruments do you want to use to get there? Which instruments are appropriate? So is it going to be online fundraising? Is it going to be crowdfunding? Is it going to be writing grants, proposals? Is it going to be networking with donors to get contracts, etc.? There's many different instruments that we also have online courses and articles on. So please check out our page, proposals4ngos.com. And Philantropia.org, because you will find a lot of material on the different fundraising instruments there. But you have to figure out which ones are the best. And it's always good to not work with all of them, because you have to choose who do we want to address, who are our potential donors, and how can we address them. Because if you decide that you think your potential donors are old people, then you probably shouldn't try to address them on TikTok, because they will not be there. They cannot be reached. If you say, oh, we just want to work with students, then probably don't make a profile on LinkedIn, because they're not going to be there. Don't put a huge ad in a newspaper, because they're not reading newspapers anymore. So you have to decide who is your target group, and how can you reach that target group, and which stories do they want to know. So all of these things you have to decide upon in this last part of your strategy. So and this is also where you diversify your funding sources, decide on different instruments. What do you want to use? You can get familiar with the funding landscape to know who is out there, who can you talk to, who can you address, who are your potential target groups. One thing you can do is answer calls for proposals. So there's many calls out, especially now as well, also for Corona-related projects. We have a free online course about fundraising in times of Corona that also has a list of potential donors. So if you're interested in that, if you want to answer calls, then please sign up for that free online course. My team will also post the link to that course in the comments. And you can see that. And networking with donors is always important, because that way you get information and you can see how you can get close to them and how you can address them. Yeah, so in the end, I just want to talk a little bit about what the Corona crisis teaches us as well. Because there's a couple of things that we can learn from this. And like I said before, this crisis now was a shocker to all of us. Nobody expected something of this size and of these dimensions. But now it happened, so now we know. So now we don't have an excuse for next time. This might happen again, so we have to prepare. So now we know. We knew that before, but now especially we know that strategic long-term planning is important. It is important to plan for the long term and to have an idea of where you want to go and how you want to get there. But this strategic planning cannot be static. It must be flexible, to be adjustable to new situations, because we just don't know what will happen. We probably also won't go back to normal again. We have a new normal now and we have to adjust to it. So strategic planning is necessary, but it has to be flexible so we can get used to a new situation. But as I said before, it's way easier to adjust an existing strategy than to just make up a new strategy from scratch every time something happens. It is super important to have several income sources to be able to work sustainably, because now we've realized that even things that we thought were super stable, were super reliable, might break away very quickly because things change drastically. But we also have to get used to the fact that uncertainty will probably be a part of our world. We will not get back to this stable or perceived stable world system that we used to live in, because that's probably not going to happen. So the earlier that we adopt to that and that we incorporate this uncertainty into our work, I think the easier it will be to deal with it and to be able to operate in this new world. So think of both sides. Strategic planning is super important, but being flexible is also important. So what should you do now? Normally, we always recommend to put your strategy into written form and attach a work plan. That is a very important first step. But again, don't be too harsh on yourself right now, because now still many things are falling into place. But having a plan and having responsibilities assigned is a very good way to start. And it's also very important to assign a budget, because some things cost money, and that's another thing that many fundraising strategies fail with, because there's not enough staff, there's not enough resources attached to them, because fundraising does cost money. It doesn't come for free, and the earlier you realize that, the better you can implement your strategy. Yeah, and it's super important, especially in this time of kind of disconnected working, that you need to, you know who will do what and when, and that everybody knows their assigned responsibilities. Yeah, so I just want to give you a little insight into our course program as well, because we address very similar things. I think with this information, you can already put together some kind of information that will help you. We also have articles about these topics on proposals4ngos.com. So please check them out. We also have online courses that address all these things specifically. So we have this, our flagship course, The 5 Obstacles on Your Way to Fundraising Success and How to Overcome Them. That's a very comprehensive course about all aspects of fundraising. And we have more technical courses as well about funding from USAID, from the European Commission, etc. But today is about the fundraising strategy, so I just wanted to put your attention to this course. It's a full course about the fundraising strategy. You can see here it's $50. We provide a workbook as well that guides you through all the questions that you should ask yourself and ask your team and ask your organization to develop a fundraising strategy. So when you take that course, in the end, you will get a workbook that will help you to really create a strategy document that you can then use to guide your work along. So I really recommend you check out that course. My team will also post the link in the comments again. And I think it will really help you to adjust in this difficult time, but to adjust in a way that is sustainable and that will help you long term. And today, because you were listening to this webinar, and we also know that these are tough times, we want to offer you a 30% coupon that is actually going to work on all of our courses. So with the coupon code PFN users, you can get 30% off any course. But I specifically recommend the fundraising strategy course because you joined today because you really want to learn more about that. And with that workbook, you will get out of it with a document that will really help you in the future. Okay, so that was my presentation. It was a little bit longer than I thought. I hope I didn't bore you. So I will switch back. And we still have time for questions. So let's see if you're still around. Okay, there's many comments I see. Let's see. Okay, somebody asked one question, how I can use TikTok for my NGO. So I'm not an expert on that particular social media channel yet, but I think it depends a lot on your target group, because if your target group are very young people who use TikTok a lot, and I also think that right now the people are returning to social media way more because they are at home, they don't have anything to do. So even older people kind of start using TikTok more. So you can just plug in your link. I don't know exactly how it works, but just engaging people. I think it's a good way, but you just have to find a way that people in your target group would answer to videos. Okay, so some of you are suggesting that my presentation was too long. Yeah, I get it. I'm sorry. Once I start talking, I kind of get too engaged. I will try to shorten my presentation for the next time. Okay, let's see. Any more questions? Okay, so one question from Citizen Portal is, what is the way to get goods in kind rather than cash? I think if you're looking for in-kind donations, it's always good to contact local businesses that are around you. I don't know where you're based, and if shipping is still working in your country, but you could try to contact businesses directly. Sometimes they are also more happy to give in-kind donations because they already have that. Sometimes they can give you things that they're not using anymore, etc. If a business has a CSR program, those are the people to contact. Otherwise, it's always good to contact their public relation department and just ask for that. Because what businesses do is when they support NGOs, when they support causes, they want to use that for their public relations. So you also have to understand clearly that if you work with a business, you kind of have to sign onto their messaging and into their values, etc. So be conscious about choosing a partner, and then trying to get the correct person and sell to them what you can offer them as well. So say you could organize for a newspaper article, you could do public relations on social media for them, etc., because they need something in return normally. But contacting directly and asking directly for what you need is a good way. And if they're local, it's even better. If they're from your own community, many times they're more apt to support you. There's another question. Should we do fundraising for our running program or new programs with donors in this situation? So this depends a lot on the projects that you do. Of course, you need to have a long-term perspective. So if you already know which projects you want to do next year, in 2 years, etc., it's a good thing to start planning for them right now and to start trying to figure out a way to fundraise for them now. But if you have something, a project now that is addressing the coronavirus right now, of course, try to get money for these projects right now. Many donors have a little bit more money available. So if you already have donors, contact them and ask them if they maybe can give you some more money, or if you have former donors that already know you, it's a good time to contact them again. We have a free course on fundraising in times of Corona, and Eric in that course addresses all these topics much more. So maybe it's a good idea to also take that course to get some more information on how to contact donors, how to get in touch with them right now. Then there's another question from Rose Lama. How much should I be spending to create a fundraising strategy as a very new NGO? There's also not one answer. It depends a lot on your budget. If you have a budget, if you almost have no budget, of course, you can't spend a lot of money. Depends on how much you have available. If you have volunteers that are willing to spend their time for free, etc. It's probably going to pay you off in the future. We also have one free webinar on our YouTube channel that you should check out about why you should consider fundraising as an investment. And why it makes sense to actually spend some money on fundraising, and why it will be make such a good return on investment. But of course, if you have almost no budget, then you can't spend a lot on it. But you can still try to use your time in a good way and sit down and put together a good strategy, even without spending too much money. But what people always forget is that time is also money. So if you don't have a strategy and you do double work and you kind of spend more time than you would have to on fundraising, that's also a loss. So in these circumstances, it makes sense to just sit down and spend maybe a little bit to kind of put everything in paper and know what to do. Then Global Solution Model says, how can I start fundraising from scratch for my new NGO? Actually, we also have a course about that and articles as well. So you can just check them out on our page. It's difficult because many, especially when you want to apply for grants, many foundations, many bigger donors want to see experience. So it's a good thing to partner up, to maybe start with very small grants. In some cases, embassies give small grants in developing countries that are a good way to start to learn how to deal with grants, etc. So that might be something useful. But again, please check out the page proposalsforngos.com and also see our online course. We have a course that is called How to Fundraise When Your NGO is Brand New, that exactly addresses these topics. So here's one question from Prem. Since NGOs are mainly dependent on field-based activities for projects and we are uncertain how long the lockdown will occur, what do you suggest to execute such projects during this pandemic time? Yeah, that's a very difficult question. It depends a lot on the project. But in general, I personally don't expect that we will go back to normal again, because nobody knows when there will be a vaccination, when there will be a treat, etc. So I think just sitting and waiting for everything to go back to normal is not the way to go. If there's any way to put to change your operations, to change your approach, I think I would try to pursue that. So I think many things can be put on a digital platform, even though right now maybe that seems impossible, because maybe you're working with rural populations, maybe there's no internet, maybe there's no digital structure, but maybe those are the things that we need to work on. Maybe that is something that has been neglected a lot. And I think for many rural areas, not having proper internet, not having the knowledge, not having the infrastructure is one of the reasons why they are behind. So maybe this can be also a time to address these things and to lift things up to the next level. So maybe you can adjust your program. Otherwise, if that is absolutely not possible, you have to wait a little bit longer and just follow developments. I know that in some countries things are easing up, in others not. So it's very difficult. It depends a lot on your circumstances. But I would recommend to try to develop ideas that work in the digital sphere as well, because this is probably, like I said, I don't think we're going back to normal as we knew it before, and this is probably not the last time this will happen. So if we can, maybe we have to think big and really start tackling things like digitalization, infrastructure, etc. But maybe those are the problems of the future that we have to solve. Of course, there's more pressing things, like people are suffering from hunger. I know that there's health issues, etc. And those things cannot be put. We cannot send digital rice. I'm clear about that. But many other things can be put on a different platform, and we should also think about those things. Yeah, and the citizen portal also just has a remark. I think that this is a worldwide situation, and it's true. It's a worldwide thing, for the first time, I think communities in all countries suffer very similar things, even though still we have a social security system that will catch us in Europe in a different way that many developing countries have. So I think there's still different issues. Okay, so I think those are almost all the questions I saw. This was a great live. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you also liked it and took away some useful information from this. I recommend you you subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we'll be doing these on a bi-weekly basis on YouTube, and every other week I will do a Facebook Live where I will also answer your questions. So please follow us and please feel free to reach out and ask us questions, because this is a good time to just get in touch and to try to support each other. Yeah, also check out our page, proposalsforngos.com, and our online courses. Like I said, if you're interested in any courses, please use the coupon code PFNusers to get a 30% discount. And I particularly recommend the course about the fundraising strategy, because I think that will help you, especially in this situation, to put together a document. But again, we also have free courses about donor research, fundraising in times of corona. You definitely should check out, because I think this is a lot of great information that we can provide you. And even if you don't have the means to pay right now, we have free courses that we also offer. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for your suggestions. I will also read through all the comments again, and I promise next time I'll be more concise. I'll make my presentation shorter. yeah, and thank you very much for attending, and I hope next time. Bye bye, and many greetings from Germany. Stay healthy.